All right, so recording now. Welcome to the Austin user group as we're talking about first party cookies. So Jen with Green Key Digital, she's also the the Pardot user group leader for the Twin Cities area. So we're so happy to have you. And then hopefully Jen, you'll also drop some links for us to your blog talking about stuff at the end. So I'm going to turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Laura. Like I said, excited to be here. And just to give you a little more background about myself, I am a Pardot user group leader as well at the Twin Cities, and I'm a consultant, and so a Pardot consultant. So I'm in Pardot 100%. That's just what I'm doing all the time. I've turned this feature on for most of my clients. I usually bring it up and say, hey, did you hear about first party tracking? They say no, and I'm like, well, here's what's happening. And then I just say, would you like to turn it on, or would you like to wait? Do you think you can want to do it? And they almost always say, yeah, let's go forward with it. And so, like I said, I've had a lot of experience with this with many of my clients. And I would have to say that for most clients, it's actually a really simple switch. Like we can talk about the background, and sometimes people are like, you can spare me the long story, just like, what do I need to do? And then when I go through it, they're like, oh, that's it. And I'm like, yeah, that's all it is, because they have a very simple scenario. And since we have a cozier group here, like feel free just to say, hey, I have a quick question. And Laura, you can help on the chat. Sometimes I get into I do have some presentation notes to go through. That's just to kind of help, tell the story. But please feel free to just, keep yourself off mute and then just ask a question. And also I might just kind of go around. I know, Brent, you're a consultant. Have you had some experience with turning on some of the first party tracking yet with anyone in your
I have actually. But I was going to ask you questions about that later, but you might actually cover in the presentation anyway. So maybe.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then. Oops, here we go. Actually, here, watch. I'm going to do this first. Awesome. So again, like we're going to cover here, what is first party tracking and what do you need to do? So can you see it then, Laura? Yeah. So Laura, can you see, you can hear us. All right. When I show my screen, like I can't see any of the comments. So I'll just count on you to just let me know if there's any dialogue going on.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, because I just looked to see if I could minimize it. Cool. All right. So just first off, I find that you just have a little bit of ground rules in terms of a ground base on understanding. Like when we talk about first party tracking, you have to kind of understand what a cookie is in the first place. And basically a cookie is just a small piece of data from a website that's stored on your computer when you browse the web. And people see and use cookies all the time. If you think, if you've, all kinds of things. Like if you've ever purchased something on Amazon, right? And then, have you ever wondered why is it, that I put, lampshades in my cart and now I'm getting I see more ads for lampshades, right? That's because you were probably cookied in some way, shape or form. And I'm not picking on Amazon, but any type of online shopping. So we've all been exposed to it. And so basically it's just whenever you're on a website, that website could put a cookie on your browser. And of course, then, it's used for some type of purpose. Pardot tracks visitor, and guess what? Pardot uses cookies too. So Pardot tracks visitor and prospect activities on your website and landing pages by setting cookies and on their browsers. So let's just dig right into it. So what's the difference between a first party and a third party cookie? So in my own words, first party cookies, they're basically created by the website you're visiting directly. So if you're on a particular domain and that one domain puts a cookie on your website, that's considered a first party cookie. Third party cookies are created outside your website. And that's called a third, so appropriately named, right? It's a third party cookie. It's not coming from the domain you're currently on. It's coming from a third party. And so that's like an easy way to remember it. But first party cookies are usually considered good. And third-party cookies are basically used more often for cross-site tracking, retargeting, and advertising. So here's just my visual that I think it makes a little easier to understand. So imagine I'm on firstbrand.com. So I'm on a website, it's called firstbrand.com. If firstbrand.com puts a cookie on my website, on my browser, that's considered first-party cookie. If, for instance, firstbrand.com happened to use video because it's got video integrated into their website, and maybe that third actually is like video.com, and the video.com puts the cookie, that would be considered a third-party cookie. And so, like I said, usually those first-party cookies are usually considered good. They're usually doing things like remembering your preferences so that when you go back to that website, they know, the screens you've looked at or the preferences that you've chosen. So those are usually meant there to have a better user experience. Whereas a third-party cookie, in reality, they're mainly used for tracking and online advertising. And so they allow for cross-site tracking. Let's just see here. So what has happened recently is there's been some privacy concerns with third-party cookies. I already kind of mentioned the shopping experience. When all of a sudden a product kind of is following you along online, that's a cookie that's using like some kind of cross-site and maybe too aggressively so. Basically what happens is that when you get cookied so many ways, you start to lose your anonymity and you start to become identifiable. And consumers are not happy with that. And they're more and more are, speaking out against it, right? They don't want that. They want to be able to have an experience online without being tracked and kind of bombarded by advertisement. There's also been a bit of a surge on cross-site request forgery, where third-party cookies are used to gain unauthorized access to systems. And I remember reading more detail about this. That made me go, you know what? Now more often it seems like when it says, a website pops up and says, can we use cookies? A lot more often I just say no, because, I just happen to be browsing on something randomly. Like I don't necessarily want to be cookied either. So consumers are speaking out against third-party cookies. And so with that, Chrome now is actually made their announcement in sense that, users are demanding greater privacy. And so this is actually just an excerpt from a blog that Chrome published in January of 2020. So this was kind of the big announcement saying that, hey, users are demanding greater privacy, and it's clear the web ecosystem needs to evolve to meet these increasing demands. And so with that, the second part of that is basically, here it is in yellow, will render third-party cookies obsolete. And so that's Chrome just saying, here's our first announcement announcing our intent. So if you want to, I've actually put the links on the bottom. Kind of fun to go see the source data of like where this is coming from. And then also just to freshen it up, because those announcements were 2020, here was their announcement in January 2021. You can see, a year ago we announced, and they're basically were reiterating, their plan to phase out third-party cookies as well. So what? So big deal, right? So just because Google comes out and says, okay, I'm going to make a change, why does that have to be such a big deal? Well, it is a big deal because if you look at the blue, this is showing a graphic of the global market share of internet browsers from January 2015 to December 2020. You can see the sea of blue at the bottom. So Chrome basically has almost 66% market share. So you can see that at this point, that's what it basically pushed Pardot to do something, where previously Firefox and Safari already in 2013 were not using third-party cookies, they had already prohibited third-party cookies. Chrome basically came out, and so now, of course, so many people use Chrome, a browser, as a choice. You're going to see more than half of your client base would probably not be able to be cookied. So all of a sudden it becomes not viable. You can't depend on it anymore. And guess what? Like I mentioned earlier, Pardot uses third-party cookies. So this is what prompted the change. Pardot, it uses third-party cookies to track across multiple website domains. And so now that made this change. So this was GA in spring of 2021. So this was in February that Pardot rolled out and made the announcement to make the switch to first-party tracking. And so while we're talking about Pardot, I think it's also important to think about other applications that are used in your company. So today, obviously, we're just talking about Pardot, but I know every company has some form of MarTech stack, right? Are you using conversational marketing? Are you using, video of some type? All of those different, are you integrated with some type of webinar application or platform? Because, it's going to affect all of those. Any of those experiences that use third-party cookies, they also should be doing something like Pardot, what Pardot is doing and making those changes, and also announce how those changes will impact or the changes that they're making to make it a more seamless experience. I'll just pause there so I'm not just kind of talking all the time. How has anyone had any other platform experience outside of Pardot where they've heard about third-party tracking and it's going to negatively impact their company?
I think people are afraid of it, that I don't think people really, like, it should be invisible to the end user, right? So like I haven't experienced anything on a website where I'm like, oh, that's cookies not being placed or something silly.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And like I said, I mean, I'm obviously working with clients, but I'm always only talking about Pardot. And so we'll talk about it generically. And I know people have different applications in their Mars stack, but I haven't heard of anyone so far that knows like, oh my gosh, GoToWebinar is going to be in a tough spot, that kind of thing. But I don't know, it'll probably shake out, I think, when the change happens nonetheless. Marcos, I'm going to start calling on you. I'm smiling, Marcos. All right.
I'm driving.
Oh, okay. I better not. I better not then, huh?
I'm listening to you. I have you up in the dashboard, but yeah.
I usually always have someone that I kind of call on just to keep the dialogue flowing. But Marcos and I, we're kind of online all the time. So I'm always, anyway, seems like I'm messaging him for a question or back and forth. We were talking. So it's good to talk to you again, Marco. Okay. So here's the thing. I like to do this because like, I think of what happened in January when we made the switch for like, you had to single sign on. And it was like, to me, the single sign on was very obvious, right? So when they make the change, when Pardot makes the change, if you haven't made the switch to single sign on, right, the risk is you just won't be able to sign on. So Pardot can feel pretty confident it's going to catch everyone because people aren't going to be able to log on at the point where they say, okay, we're completely done. I think they extended to June on that deadline. But the problem with, I think with this is that it's going to be hard to detect a problem. Many companies are going to be able to roll forward into Chrome. And one thing we didn't chat about of this. So the most recent update I heard is that Chrome said that they were going to turn off third-party cookies by early 2022. So I think just with that announcement, even Salesforce doesn't know exactly what the plan is, but they're just saying you should definitely be ready making your changes in 2021 so that in 2022 that you definitely have made your switch. But what I was going to say is that like many companies who are maybe not following all the upgrades of Pardot, they're going to be rolling into 2022. And how are you going to know you're going to have an issue? And it's going to be hard to detect a problem. You're going to just start to see things like reporting numbers may not look correct. So if things like, here's an example of a Pardot form, you might see something like, what should look like is something like 800 views and 675 submissions, but you could see something like 27 views and 675 submissions, which really doesn't make any sense, right? Because if you should probably have more views and submissions. And so it's going to be things like that that'll be throwing your numbers off. So what happens if you don't do the upgrade? I'll just kind of extend on what I was saying is that your web engagement numbers will be less trustworthy. Visitors may not be created or visitors could be orphaned. Page views may not track as you expect. Engagement data would be missing or marketing attribution can be affected for page views. So you can see there's a lot of different ways that it can impact. And a lot of times when I talk to companies who are, trying to think about what the decision is on when they want to make the switch to first party tracking, I simply just say, well, is website tracking important to you? And they'll go, yes. And I'm like, well, then let's talk about what your plan is. And then we kind of move forward from there. All right, so I'm going to jump into so what do I need to do? So first of all, you simply just go into the Pardot settings, and it's the settings domain management. And what I have here is just a quick screenshot of your tracker domains. And so you kind of, this is, you're going into this section. And with this, when I go to this page, I'm also asking, okay, how many tracker domains do you have? So I'll take a look at that. And then how many websites do you have? And so, we're going to do this because the next screen we're going to talk about is alignment and why alignment is important. And so, because what you really want to make sure is that you have a tracker domain for each of your websites. And you want to make sure that you're going to have alignment with that. So for instance, the first one here, I've got go.firstbrand.com. That's my first tracker domain. And that is aligned with the website because you can see I see firstbrand.com. So this, does that have alignment? Yes. And so therefore the result of that would be a visitor is created. So this is an example of alignment. Number two, this is an example of what's not aligned. So for instance, if you're using a tracker domain called go.firstbrand.com, and then you're using website is secondbrand.com, you can see firstbrand.com and secondbrand.com, they're not the same. That is not aligned. And then I just have number 3 here just for clarification. This is just a different subdomain. So, something like, well, what about info.secondbrand? So again, that still has alignment because even though it says info, that's got alignment with second brand and second brand. So again, very much aligned there as well. So from here, we actually usually just go through a scenario. And so here's, I think, the most baseline example. And this is what I was saying. This is kind of the simplest, easiest example to go through is you have one website. Here's your firstbrand.com website. You have one tracker domain and a very generic one here, go.firstbrand.com. And so now this company is like, okay, what do I need to do to turn on my third-party tracking? And so really this is very simple. Like if I follow the alignment examples previously, I can tell that they have alignment because I see firstbrand.com, firstbrand.com. And so then we're going to go in and edit the tracker domain. And then you simply need to update the website with the new website tracking code. And I've got some screenshots that show you that, but it's pretty simple. So here's going to be the steps. So if you go to the Pardot account settings and you select edit, you're going to be able to scroll down and you'll see this section here where it says first party tracking. So all you do is you just check the first box, and upon checking that, you're going to see these other ones pop up at the bottom as well, and that's for enabling first party tracking. You can toggle these settings on and off. I kind of just like to share that because as we know with Pardot, sometimes there's those here's the point of no return. So once enabled, you are in and there's no return. This one, you can actually toggle it on and off. It's not intended to be used that way. It's just so you know, you could turn it on and turn it off. So just wanted to point that out because that was one of the things I looked at right away. So once you've gone into settings and you've turned that on, then I simply then go back to that Pardot settings domain management. And so then on the tracker domain that you want, you can see here's my primary one. It's my default. I just go to the cog and I hit edit. And then you just basically are going to add a campaign to that. So you're going to just simply edit that and add the campaign. So now this is where you're actually assigning a campaign to your tracker domain. Then from here, you just basically want to go in, and if you have if this is a Pardot account that had some of the old tracker code, you do want to make sure you remove the old tracker code on your website and replace it with the new. So you can see that when you make the change, it provides you the tracking code right here. So you don't have to go somewhere else to get it. You simply can just copy and paste it from here. You just want to make sure that you paste it before a closed body tag on all of your HTML pages on your website. And I also have a quick reminder here. It's really important to remove the old tracking code. This was one of the things that I talked to Chris Cornett at Salesforce because he was like, yeah, just add it to them. I'm like, well, what if you have the old stuff on there? And he was like, oh, yeah, you want to make sure you remove it because he said you do run the risk of creating duplicates and visitors, and it can get kind of messy. So I was like taking notes pretty vigorously when I heard that. So, because obviously you definitely don't want to do that. Some of these large websites, you've had different people managing those websites, and maybe people did things different ways. You really want to make sure you're removing that old code. And when I asked Chris, how do I make sure that the old code is off? He said, if you can within the code, just search for pi.pardot.com. You should be able to identify all of the old tracking code to help you ensure that it gets removed.
Jen, I'm gonna stop you here real quick.
Perfect.
First of all, earlier I said thank you for joining us after I said I was driving, and I noticed I was mute, so you didn't hear that. So want to make sure that you know that we appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge with us. But I have kind of like two questions along the lines of what you're discussing right now. One is the normally, or I guess traditionally, you would create back when Pardot campaigns were still a thing, you usually end up with two campaigns, one called email plugin and the other one called website tracking. And so, for people that weren't on WordPress or didn't want to use the WordPress plugin, if you wanted to embed that code, you would go to the campaign section of Pardot and then click on the button that said view tracking code, and you kind of grab that code from there. So my question, so you showed us a good demo right now with some screenshots of how it looks like now. And my question to you is the code actually different, or is the location of it just different now?
Love that question. I actually have a slide on that. So correct.
Okay.
So it is different. And
okay.
Maybe like you, because what happened is that as soon as I was in the mode, like, again, this is, I've been a consultant for a while. So when I got into the mode of, okay, I made the upgrades, now I'm going to go get the tracking code. I went to the Pardot campaign section, the Pardot campaign tab, hit view tracking code. It's different. You do not want to use that. You need to use the Pardot settings domain management section. So the way Salesforce position is that I guess if for some reason you still need access to the old code, I don't know. Right now, if someone's getting implemented with Pardot, I actually just get them set up in the new first party tracking. I don't see the point in setting it up the old way for a couple months and then having them just switch everything out. I just get them started right out of the get-go. And so anyway, the quick answer is yes, it is different. And you can actually start to see it's, the new code is keeping things in that first party context, and it's using the, whatever domain you have set up.
So you brought up another thing that I hadn't really thought about, which was, the fact that we could have multiple websites, right? So right now I'm implementing a client, so this is kind of timely, and they have 3 different domains. So, I have 3 different website tracking campaigns, went ahead and set up 3 different tracker domains and things like that. So now it's a possibility because each of those brands, it's weird, the way that they set it up. But anyway, it's they upsell from one another, so it's like sister companies, right? Like, there'll be some organizations that will only sell one product, but then if you want to do the service, or if you want to add an add-on, you go to a different side of the business or a different brand altogether. So they're kind of set up in that way. So you mentioned, after talking to, I think he was the product manager at Pardot or Salesforce.
Oh shoot, you're breaking up here, Marcos.
My customer.
You're kind of breaking up. I don't know if you're in the tunnel over there, or I don't know if they have tunnels.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Okay. So
yeah, I think it is. Yep.
Question regarding people that have multiple tracker domains. So you mentioned there's a possibility if you have the old code and the new code that you can create duplicates in the visitor. Would that not be the same for people with multiple tracker domains? Because technically, first cookie on one is completely different from first cookie on like site B?
Well, it's also really important you make sure you add the correct tracker domain code to the correct website. So let's go back to my firstbrand.com and secondbrand.com. So let's just say I'm a company that I have two websites. Okay. So I'm going to be in Pardot, and I might email to clients from both of those websites, right? That use both websites. So I just want to make sure that when I create go.firstbrand.com, so my first tracker domain is go.firstbrand.com, that tracker domain needs to be added to your firstbrand.com website. And then your second one, the go.secondbrand tracker domain code needs to get added to your secondbrand.com website.
Okay. And I don't know if, I would assume that probably most of your clients are on the side where you mentioned earlier that it's like a very simple change because they just have one domain and that's kind of it. But have you had any customers that, have multiple ones, and where my question is going there is, do we, sometimes we have global companies that have multiple instances of Pardot or Marketing Cloud and Pardot and, things like that. And they'll want to use, I know they can't use the same exact tracker domain, but something very similar with the same, like root domain. I guess this is a brand new feature, so maybe not, but have you noticed any issues with customers that, kind of like enterprise level that have multiple instances with the similar tracker domains, but just different, the different prefix?
No,
or will they not have issues?
Yeah, I mean, as long as, I'm not quite sure I'm catching the question here, but I would say that if I have had some clients that have more than one website. So we talk about that, which usually means where they had been using one tracker domain, they now need to create a second one. So they have to create a tracker domain for their second website.
Right.
And then I'll just jump into it because this is something that we may talk about later. And then the key there is, in order for them to get tracked across both websites, they need to fill out a form on both websites. And only then will Pardot recognize that it's the same person. So I'm not sure that I'm actually answering your question on that, but I guess I'm trying to just at least walk through. I talked to Laura, we're just going to keep the simple example for this presentation.
Yep.
But because it's probably the case for most companies, but you're right, you quickly can get into some complexity when you've got large brands that have, food brands that have, 12 different domains, that kind of thing. I think Pardot, you can have up to 20 tracker domains in Pardot.
I think a good way to think about, like, this tracker that you're creating for your main website, living only on your main website, and creating a second tracker for a secondary website and a third tracker for another website. And the fact that, if I visit your first website and your second website, I'm seen as two separate visitors. I think the way to look at this is, yes, in the old scheme, if you were cookied on the first website, you would then be cookied on the second website too. Like, it would know and be able to greet you by name on the second website. In the new plan, it wouldn't be able to do that because you'd be considered an anonymous visitor on the second website and third website until you fill out a form on the second website and third website and get cookied there. Then all of your activity merges. And so that's no different than if I'm on my laptop and then I pick up my mobile phone and go browse. I'm still two different visitors on the same website until I fill out a form on both devices. Like, that is more the one-to-one way of thinking about it. Like, sure, we're involving multiple websites now, multiple tracking code, but the visitors are really no different than if you just switch devices visiting the same website.
Yeah. So okay. So I think you hit where I was going, because I was thinking, again, just briefly, and then I'll step aside and you guys can keep going, because I think this is great. I'm thinking business units, right? Yep. You have the same website, but you want to track the visitors on all, like, 2 or 3 of your business units. It's the same person, right? So, like, I was just thinking, like, well, each of them would need a tracker domain. Each of them would need, that kind of like would you have 3 individual like tracking pixels?
So here's what I heard about business units. And so I actually just caught Chris Cornett's recent presentation on it. He touched on it, but he gave me about 3 sentences, so he didn't elaborate on it. Okay,
Sure.
but I'll just repeat how I understood what he was explaining. He was like, the answer, how do you do it with business units? He was like, it's the same, but it's different. So I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And so what he meant is that you still can use the rule of subdomains still works. So like you can still create subdomains across your different business units or use the same subdomain across different business units, but you do need to have a different tracker domain. So business unit 1 would need a tracker domain that's different than business unit 2. That's kind of how he said it. So you would be able to track across business units as long as the subdomains are, do you know what I mean? Are like still going back to the core domain, right? So you would have business unit 1.firstbrand.com, business unit 2.firstbrand.com, right? So those are they're still different subdomains. So it would track across, but he did say you needed the uniqueness for the different business units.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yep.
Michelle here, Pardot leader with Laura and Marcos in this group, but my question on the tracking code is my company had to use, I could probably just chat in a link to the help article, but we had to use a shortened version of the tracking code. What the digital team was telling me is something to do with Google Ads, that this helped. It says the name of the help article, though, says tracking code to load first with an iframed form. So with that shortened code, have you run into anything with this new tracking code and how that will function properly or not?
No, I have not. I've not had that questions. I'm sure this is the first of, or maybe not the first, but one of many things that have kind of arose, have been rising to, what about this? What about this? So I haven't heard about any modifications. Simply what I've heard is that, the switch is coming and you're going to need to make the switch, and this is the code that you're going to need to do that. I don't know, Laura, have you heard anything?
I've never actually seen this shortened version of the code. It's interesting though. You can see what it is. I mean, basically it's like forcing the Pardot code to load first before any of your codes load. I can see the benefits of that. So like you'd be more in line with like Google Analytics numbers and everything else. But yeah, my guess would be that they have yet to really resolve all of these things. It's not uncommon for software companies to roll out like, here is the like base level, what you need to do for the like 95% of your customers, and then your base customers, we come back and figure it out as it occurs.
Totally. Yep.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, great questions. I like the dialogue. Anything else?
I might also ask, just as a very maybe basic and general question, but what do you see people associate, campaigns, when you associate the campaign for these tracker domains?
I still see people using some form of just website tracking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also haven't seen a lot of people, like there is functionality where you can override it. You see where it says override default campaign? So if I had assigned a campaign and then it gives me the ability to just quickly change it on the fly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen a huge practical, the case that was given to me as the example is all of a sudden, let's just say you have, I don't know, there's an event. And so you want that campaign is relevant to that event. So you could change it on the fly. The bad news is that if you then needed to change it back, you have to go reset it and change the code again. So I'm not sure if it's a huge saver or not.
Yeah.
But so to answer your question more specifically, it's simply, I see still people just using website tracking.
Yep. Great.
I have one more follow-up question. Sorry. So, a couple of months ago, it's not been a year yet, we went ahead and took our geolocation autofill. And so as we're moving to this first party world, you know, one of the things that Pardot does when on its own, when you fill out a form, it tells you, or it tries to tell you, where the lead source was, right? So if they came from Google Natural Search, from Bing, whatever. Well, without third-party cookies, we're not getting that anymore, are we?
Yeah, I'm not. I'd have to look again to see how that populates, but it's possible. I agree, because that allows that tracking across, you know, the cross tracking of capability. But I'm also not 100% sure, so I'm not sure how that would be impacted.
Yeah, I believe it pulls from the referring URL. So as long as some data is in there, but at the same time, like now we don't see a third party from website to website, so it definitely may affect that. I think that's one of those unknowns as well, part of the MVP.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's see here. What else do I have? Oh, we chatted this already. So here's, like I said, if you wanted to change the campaign, you can just hit that override. So you can do that. Got it. We already saw the cat. Oh, and so again, all right. So we've had a little bit of a break of a discussion, but again, here's the final step if you're moving to third-party tracking is there's been often, you know, some dialogue on, you know, what do I do with these 3 check marks? So I'm actually showing the screen again here where it says first-party tracking. When you check the first box, the other 2 boxes underneath it automatically come checked. And so what you just want to do is just keep them checked while you're still going through a process. Usually, you know, I guess, and it depends on your company. Usually the switch is pretty quick, right? You turn it on, you pass the code to your website developer, and a lot of times, like within a day or 24 hours, they come back and say everything's updated, which is fine. But you know, for some larger companies, that may be a longer process. And so it's good to keep the 2 below checked, which is one is using third-party cookies with first-party tracking, which means that it's still going to keep that capability of third-party cookies while you're still using first-party tracking, and also, you know, still keeping the capability on for third-party tracking. It doesn't hurt as you're kind of making that transition. But honestly, like once you go ahead and you start to, you know, you're starting to feel comfortable and things look like it's tracking fine, technically you can come back and uncheck those. Here's something that is an important thing to talk about, is that you want to make sure that your Pardot assets all have the correct tracker domain. So every time, you know, if you think about your campaign, you probably have, obviously there's something on your website. Then you're going to send an email, which means you have a template and an email, and those have tracker domains. Then you might have a form or a landing page, which may have tracker domains. And then maybe there's a download, some type of asset or PDF that's downloaded, which could have a tracker domain. So it's really important that you want that alignment needs to be everywhere. So early on, we just talked about alignment between the domain and the website, but that concept, it continues. You want to make sure that all your Pardot assets. And the good news is that in the most simple case where you simply have one website, you really don't have to do much, because once you make that tracker domain your primary, every time you create a Pardot asset like a template or a form, it automatically is adding that that primary tracker domain as your default. And so it's already kind of taking care of itself. Where you run into trouble is like someone's managing, that Pardot administrator is managing 2 websites with 2 tracker domains. And so that person is going to have to be very thoughtful and methodical about, okay, this is for firstbrand.com. So I got to make sure all my assets have the tracker domains aligned, and same vice versa. I also had a company that they sent their emails out of a separate domain that was like their marketing email domain that was different than their website. So, you know, like, again, that was something where they had to make a decision, because they were going to, like, every time she sent something, she was going to have to override the default to make sure that she had alignment, because she needed to be aligned with her website. That was what was important. The alignment needs to be with her website, not with her sending domain. Anyway, fast forward, they ended up just making the change anyway. But like I said, those are kind of the discussions I've been seeing with, like I said, different companies and different groups as we talk about, you know, making the switch to first party tracking. here's the question here as what that I actually, how do you test your first party tracking? And this was the question. I think that once I had tried this and saw success, I instantly felt confident. So what I have outlined here is like one of the ways to do it is that if you have a Pardot form, you can simply, for instance, go take a look at the form, see the number of views that you have. I have 60,236. Then basically just go into Google as incognito mode, and you want to make sure that you turn on your block third-party cookies. There's a little toggle. And then you could literally go and you can just like fill out the form. And if you come back, you're going to see it. So you can see I came back to it, and then I can see now it's increased by 1. So even while I was using incognito mode that's blocking third-party cookies, I'm still able to create the form. Since this, I actually have stopped using this one just because I've noticed that it takes a little bit for that form to show the view, to the point where I'm like, oh, it didn't work. What did I do wrong? Maybe the code didn't get added correctly. And then I wait an hour and it shows up. What I do know more often is I simply, I just basically when they tell me the code is updated, I basically go to the incognito mode, and then I just go troll around on their website to make sure that I'm triggering it. And then I just simply go to visitors. And so when I see a visitor has been created, then I know that it's working. So a little bit, something I think is just a little easier, and you get more of that instant read. And so I'm going to cover this one last section, and Laura has already actually spoken to it, but I think I feel like sometimes, like so far what I have done a little bit is given you some background and literally then went through, here's how you fix it in Pardot, step 1 through 4, you click here, do this, test it, you're done. But sometimes it's nice to actually understand a little more of how it works behind the scenes. And so, again, since third-party cookies, they're going to no longer be available. If you have any instance or any companies where you have the cross-domain situation, it's good to at least understand that. So here's my one slide. So I just have 3 examples going across. In this first example, the web user's at the top. And so imagine this web user, it went to 3 of our websites. You can see there's 2 green, 2 firstbrand.com, and 1 that's called secondbrand.com. And since 2 of these websites are hosted on firstbrand.com, those 2 are linked to visitor 1. And obviously then the secondbrand.com, that's a separate website, because you do not have third-party trackings. So it's not able to track across, that web user cannot track across 3 websites anymore. So that secondbrand.com website creates a second anonymous visitor. In the second example, let's just say the only thing that has changed is now this web user has filled out a form on firstbrand.com. Okay, so awesome. So now any of the activity under firstbrand.com is now a prospect is created. So that results in a prospect, or a visitor is then converted to a prospect. But you can see nothing happened with secondbrand.com. It has no association whatsoever. So that's completely separate. Nothing has happened. And in my third example here, it's only when that visitor then on secondbrand.com actually fills out a form, now the system realizes, oh, that's the same web user. So then, of course, that precious data from visitor 1 and visitor 2 are then known and linked to prospect 1. And so, like I said, my real life example of this is I had a client, they had their main website. It was kind of like a t-shirt company. And so they basically, all their orders for their t-shirts went through this company. And then they literally had another website called Cool Carl, because that was kind of like they just did a lot of really fun, innovative branding. So they had this other site called coolcarl.com or something. I'm making this up, so that's not real, but it was something like that. And so they had 2 websites. And in their case, they had the one primary website, and their coolcarl.com was a secondary website anyway. And so they had this situation. They're like, well, we used to be able to track across them. And so we're like, no. So you're going to have to create a second tracker domain for your Cool Carl. So they did. And then basically, in order for them to get the tracking across both websites, I'm like, you need to get people to fill out forms in both. So you'd have to start thinking about, how do you want to run your business that you would actually track across both websites? And so they were actually putting some thought to it. And at this point, this is where I think a lot of companies will probably start making some changes long term, because where you used to be able to have, and when you had third-party cookies, you could have two completely separate domains and track across. And so now, like I said, if they could have rewound time, they may have created that second website as a subdomain, right? So then they would have naturally had the connection. So I think you might see companies really thinking through the process in terms of like how they want to set up, or, how do they want to manage that second website, or is it simply a subdomain? Because obviously the benefits are there for tracking purposes. And so with that, does anyone on this call does anyone have a situation where their company has two websites?
We do.
Yeah, I don't currently, but I know a lot of companies I've worked for do. So it's pretty common, honestly.
Yeah, I have like an agency that I'm consulting, and they have like 8. So that's going to be a fun transition.
Yeah. Yep. So like I said, they'll just have to figure out, or how that will impact their tracking for sure. I guess I have another client that they do have like 6 or 8 websites, but they were also really not concerned that they couldn't track across them, right? So everyone's kind of got a different story.
Yeah, and I think that concern there is also not had by this agency because they're all separate entities.
Yeah. I didn't have any more material to present. And so, like I said, unless anyone has any other specific questions for their company, I'm just happy to kind of open up for general Q&A.
So one thing that I've done in the past, and this is very, very niche, and it goes beyond your like simple talk. So please tell me to go away if you want me to. But once upon a time, it used to be pretty common for me to recommend like, hey, do you want to see, what sections of your website are people first encountering? Cool, go ahead and deploy different Pardot tracking codes across your website. So like, oh, we've got an online store, go apply one Pardot tracking code to your store. Oh, you have a blog, go apply a different tracking code to your blog. Oh, the rest of your pages, apply your main website tracking. Now you can see like the Pardot's source campaign would fill in with the name of the campaign that they first encountered. I get the feeling that that's probably not good practice anymore. What do you think?
I've had that same question. I didn't overtly ask Chris Cornett from Salesforce on that. My guess is you just can't do it anymore because there's no functionality that allows you to do that right now. Because then you're creating a second tracker domain. And I don't know if, like I said, if you just think about how it works today, that would mean another tracker domain. And then you run the risk of creating like how all are your assets going to align to that, right? You know what I mean? My guess is their attempt to try to be able to be nimble with campaign is what I showed you when they actually showed that here's what you can do if you want to override it.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm not quite sure that's a perfect fit. My guess is that I just don't think that capability will be there.
Yeah. Okay. It was a very niche use anyway. It was not something I usually recommended. It was something I did because I could, not that it paid off super for me. So
yeah, no, I'm with you. I know exactly what you mean though, in terms of, because you might do something different because that's the pricing page or something.
Right.
So I have something that I saw in my dev work that I'm just a little like confused about, and basically I'm not sure if it is coming with the first party cookie upgrade or if it's with the HTML language. But if you go into like your dev org and you press the Linuxsoft instance button, there's a ability to like select which cookies you that you would enable on their like landing page. And when I go into the HTML language, I see like an HTML call out for consent under the I think it's the prospect consent or record consent or whatever it is. And I'm just wondering, has anybody achieved that in their like in a live production org, or is that just like forward-looking statements like in Salesforce?
I'm not sure I'm following what page you're on.
I'm right. Same here. I'm not with you.
let me see if I can log in real quick and share a link. But yeah, it's in my dev org. And then on the main page of my dev org.
Like the dashboard?
Yeah, I believe so.
Can you share your screen, or would you be, if it's your dev org, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share anything and everything with you guys.
That might be easier.
Except for my social.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so let me just see if I can do that. Is it gonna let me? Cool. Awesome. Let me know when you guys can see my
Yep.
So I just have this go to Linux soft instance, right? So it's not actually in my dev org, but it's this like preview website, I guess. And so maybe it's built into their website, I guess, but I can't see it because of, okay, yeah, I can move that out of the way. This cookie preferences. I mean, is this something that's built directly into their website? I see the Salesforce logo on it, so it confuses me. But you can accept required cookies, functional cookies, or advertising cookies. And so it really allows you to customize what cookie preference the user has. And so I'm not sure if this is just a forward-looking. Go ahead.
Well, my guess would be it's something Salesforce puts on their websites. It looks like a canned like cookie consent thing that you can buy.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I was figuring as well, but I wasn't sure if anybody had heard like this was rolling out with first-party cookies, since you're now able to get a little more detailed with them, or what. But yeah.
Can you run like close out of this and go back to the page and like run a so go to Linux Soft again, run view page source code?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but I think it's either just a custom thing that they put on their site, like Laura said, or I mean, it could be one of those marketing cloud tools that, you know.
That's kind of what I was thinking, is maybe it was marketing cloud. The link itself is just a pound.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So-
Linuxsoft is just, that's the demo that they use, right? That's that demo.
Yeah, but that wasn't there though.
So
Yes.
but in looking at it, it says OneTrust in the code, and I think OneTrust is like a brand you can buy a cookie consent.
It is.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a cookie consent. They just branded it, which I never seen before. That's cool.
I must have missed that OneTrust, because I do know that company as well. But
Yeah.
because I have a client that's still wanting to display a cookie warning, and it's reducing the traffic, and so I was going to try to engineer something like this for them, but it seems like, yeah. Okay, cool. Thank
That's
you guys
pretty cool, though.
Good question.
Did I stop sharing now?
Yep, good.
Yeah, you did.
That was very niche. I've never clicked that link before.
I had never seen that either. That was cool.
I have no idea why I clicked it, but I clicked it a few weeks back, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And so it was the first time I had seen it, so I was like, and it was all this new cookie talk, so I was like, maybe this has to go, maybe this feeds into that. And then I couldn't figure out where I'd seen it yesterday, and then I found it. So, but yeah, I'll have to look into OneTrust for the client, see if that's something I can recommend.
Well, and so Shannon, you and I are old school Pardot. Like, there used to be a page that had a page on it that, you could customize whether the cookie thing fell over the front of the page, and I don't see it in Lightning now that I'm looking for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even the cookie warning isn't still in Classic,
I found that in Lightning. I just need to remember how to do it, because two people for content had the same question. It is there.
Did they move
it's just in a very weird spot.
It's on domain management at the top of the page.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I remember, and I always forget. And there's if you go to the documentation, it's not updated for Lightning, So like there's literally nowhere that it tells you where it is. But yeah, we found it.
So it's in domain management at the top?
At the top, at the top right, it says edit tracking opt-in preferences. It's that very, very subtle button.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I was looking I was looking for this for like 3 hours. Literally.
Yeah, it took. I looked at it for like 45 minutes too.
That's
so in Classic, it used to be you just went to like, oh, here's the menu on the left side, and you had like marketing and prospects and reporting, and then admin, and you just clicked admin, and you'd get something. And now when you go to like Pardot settings, you get the like about your account page. So this, for anybody who's not familiar with it, this is the button we're talking about. This used to be in a different place in Classic. It probably still is in a different place. But this will let you choose like, you know, request opt-in from all visitors before tracking visitors. It puts a little message at the top or the bottom of your page. You can like change the positioning and the styles here. You can change the messaging. And you can choose like, oh, I only want this to show in the EU countries, or, you know, any number of things basically. And basically it puts up a splash page that says, or a little splash message that says, you know, we may use cookies, and it says yes or no. And then if they say no, or if they ignore it, it does not use the cookies on them basically. But it's very, very limited. And so OneTrust being another cookie tool, basically, like you can, all of this stuff down here that you can't see behind my little window, all of this stuff down here is something that OneTrust provides, and you can customize this obviously. And so this is much more robust than what Pardot's own tool offers. So OneTrust is what we just saw when we looked at Shannon's Linux soft demo.
I think I was thinking that was a landing page rather than a full-on like display website that they use. But now it totally makes sense now that we're looking at it.
Yeah, when you look at the code and you kind of look into this, it's like this is a WordPress page, and then as I'm looking at this, it's like OneTrust consents. Anyway. As you get familiar with HTML. If anybody doesn't know what I'm doing, as you get familiar with HTML, this stuff makes more sense.
Yeah, I've never seen one branded like that. They always say like OneTrust, so that was interesting. There's also a setting under, which I don't really know what it does, but there's a setting under Pardot settings that says there's like a setting on browsers that you can put, I think, for also tracking that says like, do not track me.
Yeah.
It may only be on certain browsers, I'm not sure. And so it's one of those boxes, that one.
This one here, it's the honor do not track header. So basically as you're using Chrome, you can customize Chrome, or you can customize Firefox, or any number of the browsers. And you can set up your privacy settings in your own. Like I can come up here to my picture and I can change it, or not there. It's here. I can come into my settings and I can change my settings, and I can say, you know, set a do not track command. And then when I visit a website, it's saying, you know, it will honor the do not track settings, and I can also disable it. So if you're wanting to be on the up and up and not track people proactively, you know, you leave it enabled. There's another setting that here is the max tracking cookie duration. So basically by default, all of your Pardot cookies expire after 365 times. Yeah. So it's 10 years, 365 days times 10 years. Now you can reduce the number and be like, oh, I'm only going to store you for 90 days or something like that, depending on what your company is doing. They may or may not have specific settings that you need to change. But for the most part, it doesn't bother anything. People expect to be tracked anymore. So GDPR and PII and all these things are not having as big an effect as I think people were afraid they would. Anyway.
Yeah, that's the exact experience I had with when GDPR came out. You know, it was a mad rush. And then when CCPA came out and I was working at Raptor Technologies, I was a part of this board that we set up everything, and to this day I don't think they've had a call. I'm still friends with the guy that I was on there with, and so it's always these big rushes. I think first party is a little more prevalent because of that infographic that was shared with us, about how much Chrome is actually dominating kids.
Yeah, and Safari has for years not done third-party cookies. They've only done first-party cookies. So for years, you've not been able to track any Mac users using Safari. And now, Mozilla and others, they're big, internet consortiums who are trying to push the privacy first model, and good on them. It makes our job a little harder, but in the long run, I don't think it's going to impact us too much. And first party tracking is going to be good in the long run.
Absolutely.
A little bit tedious now, but super easy to change once you do it. All right. I think we're going to wrap up. Thanks, Jen, so much. Any last questions for Jen?
No, but thanks for having me. It's great to have the conversation and talk to people, on a more one-to-ones. I love it.
Absolutely.
And Jen, you answered my question. I actually had to do about the checkboxes. So thanks for explaining that so clearly and methodically. I really appreciated that.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone. I'm going to sign on to sign off. Have a good day.
All right. Take care.
I'll be recording in a little bit here.
All right.
Ciao.
Thanks.
Everyone.
Take care.
Thanks.